whether they ended it or you ended it, whether all the signs were leading up to it or it caught you off guard or by surprise. Regardless of the situation or circumstances, what you had with them has ended and your heart is hurting. As the popular quote says, the heart wants what it wants. And there, my friend, in lies the main reason it is so difficult to move on from someone you open your heart to. And so I want to give you some timeless steps that will be both practical and spiritual in nature that you can always come back to whenever you find yourself in a heart season like this one. So let's jump right into it. So, the first step, which is going to lay the foundation for everything else, is about getting your heart in agreement with your mind. Your head knows it's over between them, whether it's just over for a season or it's over for good. But the thing is, we need the heart to know what the head already has realized. So this brings us to the question of, well, how does the heart learn then? And the answer is through repetition. Notice how when a person puts walls up around their heart and they are unable to be vulnerable and let people in, it's because somewhere along the way, they continue to experience people who weren't healthy lovers, people who mishandled their heart and took their love for granted. And after repeated experiences like this, the heart learned that since people can't be trusted, we need to put walls up. But I want you to understand that putting a wall up is different than guarding your heart. Putting a wall up is about them, where guarding your heart is about you. And so in order to get your heart in alignment with what your head, again, already knows, you have to simply keep reminding your heart whenever it begins communicating with you. Because emotions are the language of the heart. The heart doesn't speak to you in words, but in feelings. And so when the feeling comes up, whatever it is, missing them, wishing it was different, feeling sad, feeling angry, feelings of regret, remorse. Anytime a feeling comes up around this person, you have to remind your heart of what it is now. Because the heart is holding on to the memory of them. And so you have to now give the heart the correct reality of them and of the situation with them. And the easiest way to do that is to create a list. And so I want you to write a list of why it didn't or couldn't work. And you can also include in this list the things that you didn't really like and so on and so forth. And if you are having trouble identifying these things, if you're kind of feeling like, well, no, it was so perfect, nothing was wrong, that is most likely because you are not being completely truthful and honest with yourself. Because the reality is that if everything, if everything was really as good as you are telling yourself, then you two would still be together. And so there is going to be something for you to write, even if you have to kind of think about it. And so I want you to write this list. And once you have written the list, I want you to keep that list on you. Keep that list on your person. And every time your heart begins speaking up, I want you to whip out that list and read it out loud. And you will notice that for a moment, your emotions will line up with your current reality. Now, it's important for me to tell you that this is the process of training your heart. So you think about any process of training, training at the gym, training for work. You're learning through the act of it. You're learning through repetition. And so don't be upset with yourself if you have to pull the paper back out 2 minutes later, after you just said it out loud, because your heart is communicating the same pain to you again, just moments after. And again, this is the process. And so I want to encourage you to just be patient with your dear heart. Okay. Now, once you notice that your heart is not as active in its communication about this person, you can begin the next step, which is identifying the lesson. Because again, you are training your heart. So now I want you to get a piece of paper and I want you to write down everything this relationship taught you. Okay, so once you've gotten past the first step, this is the second step. So you can get rid of that other piece of paper from the first step, and now you're getting a fresh piece of paper for this second step. And you're going to write down everything that person taught you about yourself, about life, about what you really want, about what you deserve, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason this step is second and not first is because when the heart is still hurting, it can be hard to see anything good as it pertains to the person. And so now that the heart is better aligned with the mind and not overpowering it, you can objectively think and reflect on what you learned. So you know what you want to do differently next time. And this process of reflecting on what you learned, of reflecting on your pattern, is so crucial, because if you don't take the time and sit with you and you just keep going and you miss these important lessons, then you end up repeating the same thing again. And so you want to identify these things, these patterns, what you have learned, what you realize now, so that you can do things differently the next time. So I want you to write out everything this past experience has taught you. And once you finish, just like before, I want you to keep this paper on your person. And whenever the heart begins yapping about this person, I want you to pull out your paper and read it out loud to yourself. And as you do it, you are reminding the heart that you all are better off because of the experience. And again, you may read this and your heart calm down, only to be stirred up again emotionally a few minutes later, in which case you simply pull out your paper and repeat this process, because again, repetition is how the heart learns. Now, after you have repeated this for some time, and you will know when it's okay to move on to the next step, because the heart will go from yelling at you with its emotions, meaning you will feel strongly and aggressively, to kind of just whispering. And once there is more silence in your emotions regarding this person, then there is noise. And let me just say, you don't have to do this exercise only when it pertains to an intimate partner that is no longer in your life. You can do this exercise for anyone that has hurt your heart by leaving, or your heart is hurt because you had to maybe set the boundary and leave them. And so I want to throw that in there, that it doesn't just have to be for an intimate relationship. But again, once there is more silence in your emotions regarding this person, then there is noise. You know that the heart is getting the message, okay? That the training has been going good. And now you are in a pure enough heart space to move on to the third step, which is praying for them. Now, if you hadn't gone through the previous steps, the heart could have wickedly deceived you into praying prayers that were rooted in your will and not in God's will. And the thing about God is He's not going to overpower a person's will. And this can really get tricky, especially if you have spiritual confirmations about your relationship. If you've had dreams or prophetic words or these different things, you can be tempted to pray into those things, now realizing that ultimately, if you're praying for something to happen right now and it's not, say, God's timing, for example, then you are indeed praying your will over the matter, even though you may have good intentions. Okay? It's interesting that Jesus, when they asked him how to pray, and the reason they were asking Jesus how to pray is because they noticed that the results he was getting with his prayers was different than the results of the other people that they saw praying in the streets and, praying these kind of long, high and lofty prayers. And as Jesus is explaining to them how to pray, he says to pray, your kingdom come and your will be done. That this is what you're saying to the Father. But when the heart is still fixed on its agenda, again, we risk praying, our will be done. And so if you're praying in a way that is not accepting the free will that this other person is entitled to exercise, then you're not praying in accordance with God. Because not even God infringes on a person's free will. And so this step is where you allow yourself to no longer see them as anything other than the child of God that they are. And just like you, they too were created and designed in the image of the Almighty God to experience the love of God and to give that love away. And so whenever the heart begins to speak of them, I want you to take a moment and out loud, I want you to say a prayer for them. Now, a good way to measure if you are praying God's will is to think of how you would pray for, say, someone you have had no negative history with, or someone that your heart wasn't super attached to, just someone that you just feel the love of God for and the peace and rest of God. And so if you can picture someone that you feel those things for, maybe, a person that at your job, or someone you grew up with, someone in your church community, maybe. But if you can get the picture of them in your mind, and so then your heart understands that, oh, okay, it would be like praying for them. Then you can out loud pray for this person in that same capacity. You can pray that they experience everything that God planned for them to experience while they're here, that they live out their experience with the peace of God that surpasses understanding. You can pray that they don't leave this experience without having attained all that they were supposed to take hold of. I love that scripture where Paul is saying that I may take hold of why God has taken hold of me. Ultimately you're praying that God's will would be done in their life. And so this is what I want you to do for them, in this same spirit, as if you were praying for someone that you, again, have no heart history with. Okay, so with that same energy, that same fervency, every time the heart brings them up. Now, in the last 2 steps, I'm going to show you how to fully release them in the spirit so that you can have room for what God desires to bring next, as well as how to make sure that next time you don't repeat this same story and pattern, assuming that the next one, okay, that comes into your life, hopefully the next one that you decide to pursue a relationship with is the right one, because like we've been declaring, the season of the cycle of the counterfeits are over. And so these steps will be available to you on my Patreon page. You can use the link on the screen to join me and the rest of my Patreon family. Please know that I love you so much, and I am so grateful that you are here, and my heart hurts that you have to go through this right now. But I know that if you do these steps, you will get through this tough time, and you will come out better and stronger because of it. And so I am congratulating you on doing the hard work that is needed to really move on and move forward.